What's one small thing someone did in your family that left a big scar?
They toasted my sister's engagement while I stood by the kitchen doorway, holding a ceramic dish that was still hot from the oven. The kind of heat that makes your fingers go numb before they burn. My mother raised her glass first, a fragile little thing she usually reserved for New Year's Eve, but apparently Emily's engagement was worthy of dragging it out of the cabinet. Dad followed, glass already in hand like he'd been waiting to give this speech his whole life. He said something about Emily being a blessing, how proud he was of the woman she'd become, how her fiancé, Derek, was a good man, and how they just fit. I heard all of it. Every word. Every single damn syllable. But not once, in the entire 10-minute clinking glass extravaganza, did they mention that I was the one who picked up Mom from her physical therapy appointments for the last 2 years. That I was the one who paid her copays when Dad's card got declined, and nobody said a word about it. That I brought the damn roast beef, for God's sake. There's something hollow about standing 10 feet away from people who share your blood and realizing they see straight through you. I could have dropped the dish right then and there, just let it shatter on the tile floor, watch them all jerk in surprise and maybe, just maybe, remember I existed. But I didn't. I set it down carefully on the counter, next to the store-bought cake Emily brought and Mom gushed over like it was baked by angels, and I grabbed a rag to wipe the already clean stove. I don't know why I did that. Maybe it was just muscle memory. Maybe it was the quiet fury bubbling up in my gut that needed something, anything, to keep my hands busy so I wouldn't say what was screaming behind my teeth. The night went on, long and drawn out like a funeral that refused to end. Emily told stories about Derek, how he proposed on a weekend getaway, how he cried when she said yes, how he already talked to Dad about being part of the family. I stood near the sink, scraping plates, my back turned to all of them, pretending not to hear the way Mom laughed like her lungs had just come back to life. I could feel it in my bones, they were proud of her. They saw her. She was the picture on the mantel. I was the dust behind it. They didn't ask me anything. Not how work was going. Not if I was seeing anyone. Not even if I wanted a piece of the cake I paid for, indirectly, when I covered their groceries last month and told Mom to keep the change. And you know what? I didn't say a damn word either. Not that night. Not out loud. I smiled when Emily showed off her ring, told her it was beautiful, which it was, a tasteful little oval-cut diamond with rose gold band, probably picked out by someone who had her figured out from day one. I cleared every plate. I ran the dishwasher. I poured the leftover wine down the sink after they left, and then I sat in the dark for a good 20 minutes, just me and the kitchen hum, feeling like a ghost in my own family home. It was past midnight when I finally went up to my room, the one with the same faded wallpaper from high school, the same creaky twin bed I had since I was 12. That's when the text came. My phone buzzed once. Emily. No emojis. Just words. What did you say to them? Mom looks sick. I stared at that message for a long time, longer than I probably should have. I read it again. Then again. And something in my chest shifted. Because the truth was, I had said something not out loud, not during the toast or the dinner, but afterward. When everyone was outside saying their goodbyes, when Derek was showing Dad some new app on his phone, and Emily was getting something from the car. That's when I caught Mom alone in the kitchen, still holding her champagne glass like it had something important to say. She looked so content. So damn satisfied. I couldn't help myself. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just leaned in and asked, in the calmest voice I could find, did it ever cross your mind that I might have wanted a toast too? Her smile twitched. Just a little. Like she hadn't expected me to speak. I kept going. Or that maybe I didn't need a toast. Maybe I just wanted to be seen. To be something other than your help. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I stepped closer. You know why I never bring anyone home, Mom? It's not because I'm a loner or picky. It's because I'm too busy keeping this family from falling apart while Emily floats around like a damn feather. You want to know what your toast should have said? Thank you, Dana, for holding your mother while she cried after the stroke. Thank you, Dana, for sleeping on a fold-out couch for 3 months so I could recover at home. Thank you, Dana, for sacrificing your own life quietly so we didn't have to feel guilty. That's the toast I deserved. She didn't answer. She just sat down slowly, eyes wide like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed the glass on the table. I didn't wait for a response. I walked away, picked up the trash bag, tied it shut, and left it by the back door. I didn't need her to say anything. The silence was enough. So when that text came from Emily, asking what I said, I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, thinking, you really want to know? You want the version where I finally ripped the polite mask off and showed her the daughter she turned into a servant? Or do you want the version where I said nothing at all, and Mom just suddenly realized what a stranger I'd become? Because sometimes the cruelest things aren't what you say. They're what you don't say for 20 years, and then finally do, in just the right tone, in just the right moment, when the whole house smells like roast beef and celebration, and you're not invited to the table. And the part no one ever sees coming? Is how good it feels when the silence finally hurts them more than it ever hurt you. You spend your whole life swallowing things that don't go down right, little dismissals, quiet betrayals, offhand comments that get brushed off as jokes, but feel like slaps, and for a while, you convince yourself it's fine, that it's all just part of how families work, that not every moment has to be fair or even acknowledged, that maybe being the dependable one means being the invisible one too. But the truth is, every swallowed thing sits somewhere inside you, like coins collecting at the bottom of a well, until one day, you try to speak and realize your voice sounds like metal scraping up a pipe. That Sunday night wasn't the first time I wanted to say something. It was just the first time I finally did. I didn't sleep well after Emily's text. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the creak of tree branches outside tapping against my window like impatient fingers. I thought about whether I'd gone too far, whether I'd pushed some line I wasn't supposed to touch. But then I remembered all the lines they crossed, again and again, without hesitation. Like the time Mom forgot my birthday but remembered to send Emily flowers at her new job. Or how Dad once told me I was stronger than Emily, and that's why I didn't need as much attention, like being dependable was some kind of punishment I had to endure with grace. And what made it worse, what twisted the knife, was that Emily wasn't cruel. She was sweet, well-meaning even. She just didn't see it. Didn't see me. And maybe that was worse than being deliberately ignored. At least with cruelty, you can fight back. That Monday morning, I didn't get up to cook breakfast like I usually did when I stayed over. I let the silence settle, let it do the talking for once. I stayed upstairs, scrolling through work emails I didn't care about, listening for movement downstairs. Around 9, I heard the back door open, followed by Dad's heavy steps and the sound of cabinets opening and slamming in that impatient way he had when he couldn't find something. I didn't go down. Let them fend for themselves. That used to make me feel guilty. Now it felt like a kind of small, earned rebellion. It wasn't until just after noon that I heard Mom's voice, quiet, hoarse, almost hesitant, call my name from the bottom of the stairs. I waited a beat before responding, then walked down slowly, already bracing myself for whatever awkward apology or passive-aggressive remark was coming. But she didn't say much at all. Just looked at me, really looked, like maybe she'd never quite seen me in that lighting before, and said, "I didn't know you felt that way." Her voice cracked a little on no, and part of me, the part still wired to please, wanted to rush in and fix it, to soften the blow, to tell her it wasn't her fault. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "That's the problem, Mom. You never asked." She sat down at the kitchen table, fingers loosely wrapped around a mug she hadn't taken a sip from. "You always seemed so capable." "That's not the same as being okay," I replied, and for a moment, the only sound was the wind brushing against the windows. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just told her the things I'd never said, how I felt like the spare daughter, the utility version of Emily who came with all the maintenance, but none of the attention. I told her how it felt to spend hours driving her to appointments, rearranging my work schedule, cleaning up after her when she was too proud to let anyone else see her in that state, and then still somehow end up on the sidelines when the family came together. I told her I wasn't jealous of Emily, but I resented the way they made it seem like only one daughter could be loved out loud and the other had to earn her keep quietly. She didn't interrupt. Not once. And I'll give her that. She just sat there, blinking like she was trying to keep something in. Maybe guilt. Maybe shock. Maybe both. I didn't expect her to fall apart. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted the words out. And once they were, I felt something loosen in my chest, something old and tight and hard. She reached for my hand then, slow, hesitant. But I didn't take it. I couldn't. Not yet. Later that day, I packed my things and left, without making a fuss, without asking if they needed anything, without checking if the fridge was stocked or if Mom had her prescriptions sorted for the week. And that was a first. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cool wind slap some color back into my face, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt like I had reclaimed something, my voice maybe, or at least the right to not always be the one who made everything better for everyone else. But that night, when I checked my phone, I saw another message from Emily. It was longer this time. She said Mom had been acting strange all day, like she'd seen a ghost or gotten news from the doctor that shook her. She said Dad wasn't talking to her, that he kept going out to the garage, slamming tools around. She asked again, "What exactly did you say to them?" "Mom won't tell me. She just keeps saying she meant it." Emily sounded confused. Hurt. Scared even. And I thought, good. Maybe it's time she got a taste of what it's like to be left in the dark. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Because the truth is, I wasn't done saying what I needed to say. Not by a long shot. There's something deeply unsettling about the way a house starts to feel after truth has finally been spoken aloud, not yelled, not dramatized, just calmly unpacked like a suitcase no one wanted to acknowledge had been there the whole time. The air goes still, like the walls themselves are holding their breath, and even the furniture feels heavier somehow, as though it too has absorbed the weight of years of unspoken tension that was never intended to be given form. After I left their house that Monday, after telling Mom exactly what I had carried for what felt like a lifetime and choosing not to pretend everything was fine, a silence seemed to settle over all of us, not just the kind where nobody talks, but the kind where the very fabric of the family shifts, cracking somewhere deep and quiet where no one can point to it directly, but everyone can feel that something has changed. For the next 2 days, I received nothing but stillness. No calls, no messages, not even a passive-aggressive email from Dad pretending to ask about my job, but really trying to reestablish control. I didn't go out of my way to contact them either, because I knew deep down I had already said everything I needed to, and anything else would only serve to smooth over the jagged edge I had so carefully left exposed. It wasn't about revenge, not yet at least. It was about recognition. About finally demanding to be seen, not in the polished, respectable way they preferred, but in the raw, uncomfortable light of who I really was, the daughter who kept things going, who held her mother's body when it failed her, who paid bills and cooked meals and played the role of solid one until she disappeared entirely behind the scenery of everyone else's lives. And yet, as I sat in my apartment, that text from Emily kept burning a hole in my pocket, metaphorically at first, and then, somehow, almost physically, her question circling my brain over and over again. What did you say to them? There was something panicked in her tone, something that suggested Mom hadn't just taken my words hard, but that something had fractured, something deeper and more unsettling than Emily had ever had to confront within our family. For a while, I let myself feel satisfaction, petty and small, maybe, but real all the same, because there was a part of me that wanted them all to sit in the discomfort I had lived in for so many years. That wanted them to know what it felt like to be disoriented by someone else's version of the truth. But satisfaction has a short shelf life, especially when it's born from pain. By Wednesday evening, curiosity had curled into something closer to anxiety, though I would never have admitted that out loud. I didn't want to care. I didn't want to wonder. But the silence began to feel loaded, too heavy to be mere avoidance. And that's when I got a voicemail, not from Mom or Emily, but from my father, which alone was rare enough to make me sit down before I played it. His voice, gravelly and controlled, betrayed just a hairline crack in the tone, as though he were forcing every word through clenched teeth. He didn't say much. Just that Mom hadn't been herself lately, that she wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating much, that she seemed unwell, and that if I had something to say, if there was something else I was holding on to, I should call him directly, man to man. As if I hadn't spent years being the one to hold everything together, because he refused to. As if my pain had suddenly become valid now that it had bled into their lives, stained their comfort. That was the moment I realized. The only reason they cared now was because my pain had stopped being convenient. It had stopped being silent. I didn't call him. I didn't want another performance, another round of stoic posturing and half-baked excuses about how things were different back then, or how your sister needed more support. What I did do was pour myself a glass of the cheap red wine Mom used to keep for when guests came over, and she wanted to pretend we were the kind of family who had traditions and warmth and Sunday brunches with laughter. I sat at my kitchen table, alone, and I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years, a Thanksgiving when I was 17, when Emily had just broken up with some boyfriend and cried for 3 hours straight while I set the table, cooked half the meal. And no one even asked how my college applications were going. I remembered Mom stroking Emily's hair while she sobbed, whispering, "You're the heart of this family," and I remembered how those words felt like an erasure, like someone reaching into my chest and pulling out the part that still believed I belonged. So when I finally responded to Emily's message, 2.5 days later, I kept it simple. No anger. No sarcasm. Just a truth she wasn't ready to hear. I told her what it felt like to be invisible. I told her everything you never noticed. The typing dots appeared immediately, flickered, then disappeared. No reply. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of those words settle into the quiet of my apartment. That night, I dreamt of our old house, not how it was now, but how it was when we were kids. The peeling paint on the porch, the backyard full of dandelions and mud, the tiny bedroom I used to share with Emily before she got her own. In the dream, we were both sitting at the dinner table, only this time, I was the one being toasted. I watched Mom lift her glass, eyes full of pride, and say my name like it actually meant something. I woke up with a strange mix of guilt and satisfaction swirling in my gut. But when I checked my phone that morning, the real message waiting for me wasn't from Emily. It was from a neighbor of my parents, someone I barely knew. Just one line. "Your mom collapsed in the yard this morning. Ambulance just left." And, just like that, the game changed. The wine went sour in my mouth. The silence I'd fought for began to sound a lot like regret. It's strange how the world doesn't pause for your personal unraveling, how traffic still moves, how people still laugh into phones on the sidewalk, how the sky doesn't darken out of sympathy when something inside you breaks so suddenly that you forget how to stand still. The message about my mother, short, clinical, devoid of emotion, sat on my screen like a dare, like some quiet test of whether I'd cave and rush to her side or finally hold the line I'd drawn so carefully in the sand only days before. For a few minutes, I just stared at it, phone clutched in both hands, heart pounding in that panicked, hollow rhythm that feels less like fear and more like confusion disguised as urgency. My first instinct was to run, to pack a bag, call ahead to the hospital, show up and pretend like the years of emotional erosion hadn't built a canyon between us, but then I realized I didn't even know where they'd taken her. The text gave no details, no hospital name, no mention of her condition. Just that. She collapsed, and the ambulance came. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just the kind of cryptic alert that knocks the breath out of your lungs not because it's dramatic, but because it's so cold. I waited an hour before I did anything. I think I needed to sit in that space between reaction and regret, to decide whether I was acting out of guilt, duty, or something that resembled love but didn't quite feel like it anymore. Eventually, I called Emily. She didn't pick up. I texted her, asked where Mom was. She replied 5 minutes later with the hospital name and a short sentence. "She's awake, but something's off. Dad's not talking." That was all. No hello. No emotion. Just the information, delivered like a transaction. I took down the name, sat with it, and then, out of habit or obligation or something more deeply wired, I grabbed my keys and drove. The road to the hospital was familiar, the same one we'd taken after Mom's stroke, the same one I drove week after week to take her to follow-up appointments she never thanked me for, the same one I memorized like a song you hate but can't stop humming. As I drove, the silence in the car pressed in on me, and I found myself reaching for the radio, not to hear music but just to fill the space with something other than my own thoughts, which had begun to cycle on repeat. What if she really was sick? What if she was dying? And would that change anything? Did I want it to? When I arrived, I didn't go in right away. I sat in the parking lot and watched the revolving doors open and close, people coming in with flowers, others leaving with red-rimmed eyes or tired faces, and I thought about how hospitals are the only places where life and death literally pass each other in the hallway. I wondered where we were on that spectrum. I wondered whether my words had been a final blow or just the long-overdue truth she couldn't digest. I wondered if I'd ever stop wondering. Eventually, I went in. The woman at the front desk looked up with a tired smile, and I gave her my mother's name, my voice low and flat, as though I were delivering a password to a stranger guarding something sacred. She pointed me to the elevator. No waiting room, no paperwork. Just go. As I stepped out onto the third floor and made my way to room 314, I saw Emily first, standing just outside the door, arms crossed, eyes heavy, face drawn in that way that tells you she hadn't slept and wasn't planning to. She looked at me with something between relief and suspicion, and when she spoke, her voice cracked in a way that surprised both of us. "She's not herself," she whispered, like it was a confession. "She keeps asking about you. Keeps saying she needs to see you. That she needs to explain." "Explain what?" I asked, already feeling that strange pressure build behind my eyes, the kind that comes not from tears, but from years of restraint finally cracking. "I don't know," Emily said, looking down. "She won't say. But she keeps muttering about something you said. Something about the backyard. About that night." I didn't remember mentioning the backyard in our conversation, but I said nothing. I just nodded and pushed the door open gently, unsure of what I expected to find. Mom was lying in bed, pale but alert, her eyes fixed on the window like she was watching something far away. When she turned to look at me, her face didn't light up, but it didn't flinch either. It just softened, as though she had seen me coming from miles away and was already preparing for the weight of what had to be said. "You came," she whispered, and I hated how small my name sounded in her mouth. "I did," I replied, standing at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, shoulders locked. "Emily said you wanted to see me." "I do," she said, voice shaking now. I didn't know. About how much you held. I didn't realize that I made you feel like a ghost." I stayed silent. Let her speak. She took a breath, slow and labored, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not fear of me or of death, but of truth. Raw, ugly, permanent truth. "There's something you should know," she said, and suddenly I wasn't ready anymore. "That summer, Emily left for college. You remember? When Dad and I were arguing all the time." I nodded, barely. "There was a letter. One you wrote? I found it. You'd hidden it in the linen closet behind the towels. It was about leaving. About going across the country, starting fresh, cutting ties. You poured everything into that letter, your anger, your heartbreak, your loneliness. You were 16. And I read it. I read every word. I blinked. I had forgotten about that letter. Truly forgotten. It was a moment of teenage desperation, a storm I never thought reached anyone. But now, the memory came flooding back, all salt and bitterness. "I should have said something," she continued. "I should have held you. I should have told you I was sorry. But I didn't. I panicked. I buried it. And I buried the part of you that wrote it because it scared me. Because it meant you might leave, and I didn't know how to be without someone holding the pieces together." I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. I just stared at her, seeing not my mother, but a woman too scared to confront the damage she had done, even as it unfolded in front of her for years. "So you kept me around by pretending I didn't need anything," I finally said, my voice cold. She didn't deny it. She just closed her eyes and nodded. When I left the room, I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel rage. I felt something quieter, heavier. Like standing in the eye of a storm, knowing the other side still has to pass over you. Emily looked at me, eyes questioning, but I walked past her and down the hallway without a word. And as the elevator doors closed, I realized, sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it chains you to something worse, an understanding you can never unknow. There's a certain kind of silence that follows confession, not the kind that brings peace, not the kind you hear in movies when a mother finally bares her soul and the daughter, with trembling lip and welling eyes, forgives her in one dramatic breath. But a far more corrosive kind of silence, the kind that seeps into the floorboards and lingers in the corners of a room like the stale smell of something that's rotted for too long. That was the silence I carried with me as I left the hospital, that heavy, airless quiet that followed me down the corridor, through the lobby, across the parking lot, and into the driver's seat, where I sat motionless for several minutes, hands on the wheel. Engine off, watching my reflection in the rearview mirror and wondering, not for the first time, whether I had done something irreversible. The truth my mother had given me, the one about the letter I wrote at 16, the one she found and read and hid, should have been some kind of key, a missing puzzle piece that would allow everything to fall into place, or, at the very least, explain why she had never seen me clearly, why she had clung so desperately to the idea of Emily as the golden child and to me as the reliable ghost. But instead, it had only widened the distance between us, not because it wasn't sincere, but because it had come too late. What could I do with that information now? What healing could come from the knowledge that she had read my teenage heartbreak and instead of comforting me, had stuffed it behind towels and decided the safest thing to do was pretend it hadn't happened? In that moment, staring out at a parking lot full of strangers, I felt the slow, creeping realization that my entire role in this family, every selfless act, every quiet sacrifice, every holiday where I had cooked and cleaned and disappeared while Emily smiled in every photo, had not only gone unrecognized, but had been strategically ignored, because to acknowledge my pain would have forced them to face their own failures. My usefulness had been a currency they spent freely, and when I stopped offering it unconditionally, they had no idea how to relate to me. Without the chores, the errands, the reliable rides to appointments, I became not just unfamiliar, but a threat. I drove home slowly that night, letting each red light hold me longer than necessary, taking detours through old streets I hadn't seen since high school, trying to understand the strange, hollow ache that was building in my chest. It wasn't grief, not exactly. It wasn't rage either, though it flirted with that feeling now and then. It was something murkier, more complicated. A kind of sadness that comes when you realize the version of family you built in your head, what you thought they were, what you hoped they might become, was never real to begin with. That, perhaps, the people you gave your love to were only ever willing to receive it when it came without demands, without expectation, without mess. That night, I didn't sleep. I cleaned. Not obsessively, not frantically, but with slow, purposeful movements, the kind you make when your body needs to do something, anything, to hold back the tide of thoughts that are threatening to swallow you whole. I scrubbed the counters, folded laundry I didn't remember washing, rearranged bookshelves that didn't need rearranging. And somewhere between dusting the picture frames and wiping down the kitchen table, I remembered something else, something so sharp and clear it felt like someone whispering in my ear. A conversation from 2 years ago, not long after Mom's stroke, when she was recovering on my couch, her face still partially slack, her speech just starting to return. She had been watching an old video of Emily's college graduation, one I hadn't attended because I had to work double shifts that weekend to cover Mom's mounting medical bills, and she turned to me and said, in a slurred, broken voice, "She always shined, didn't she?" And I had nodded, out of instinct, out of habit, out of that old, bone-deep need to avoid confrontation. But now I realized how easily I had been complicit in my own erasure, how many times I had chosen silence over truth, not because I lacked the words, but because I was afraid of what speaking them would cost. The next morning I returned to the house. Not the hospital. The house. The place where it all began. Emily was already there, sitting in the living room, her face pale, her phone clutched like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. She didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. "She's coming home tomorrow," she said without preamble. "The doctors say it was stress. Mostly. Nothing fatal. Not yet, anyway." I nodded, walking past her, heading straight for the kitchen. I opened cabinets, pulled open drawers, took in every detail like I was cataloging a crime scene. Then, calmly, I said, "You should go. I'll stay with her for a few days." Emily looked at me, hesitation flickering across her face. "Are you sure?" "No," I said honestly. "But I'm doing it anyway." She didn't argue. She gathered her things, said something about being close by, and left without another word. That night, I didn't speak to Mom much. She was still weak, still emotionally frayed, and I had no desire to play nurse again, at least not in the way I once had. I made her tea, watched as she sipped it with trembling hands, and when she finally fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen and wrote a new letter, not out of pain, not out of desperation, but out of clarity. It wasn't long, but it was direct. I told her that I no longer expected the kind of love I had once chased from her. That I didn't need validation anymore. That I had seen the truth, and I accepted it for what it was, not a failure on my part, but a limit on hers. I didn't hide it this time. I left it on the kitchen table, where I knew she'd find it in the morning. And then I made myself breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee just the way I like it, not the way she prefers, not the bland, overcooked version I used to make for her out of habit. And when I sat down to eat, alone, in the stillness of that house, I felt something shift, not forgiveness, not healing, but a reclamation. The leftovers were mine now, the cold truths, the forgotten birthdays, the unpaid emotional debts. They were mine to deal with, to name, to bury or display as I saw fit. And for the first time, I wasn't carrying them for anyone else. I was just choosing what I wanted to keep, and what I was finally ready to leave behind. And maybe that's not the kind of ending that gets tied up in a bow, not the kind that leaves everyone hugging and healed, but it's real. And it's mine.